fundamentally, I think that some of the issues we are dealing with are very diverse and somewhat very contradictory to a certain extent. So, as in some of our discussion, I think I kind of made clear that on one hand there is a way by which the university has been pushed towards interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity in many different ways, and that is what I would think is a very positive process, obviously, because to a certain extent it's pushing us towards very concrete, complex problems, and is inviting us to consider how complex problem requires the cooperation and the joining of forces of many different disciplines coming together in order to address these complex issues. So to a certain extent this is important because it's avoiding a kind of sectorial understanding of the single processes where the disciplines are staying within their own domains without really talking to each other and so on. So that's a positive, I think, indication of what's happening. However, together with this, where you have management students, particularly studying for example, for the Ph.D., working alongside economics, linguistics, and other sociology and other disciplines, so that's a very positive one. But on the other hand, you have also a broader pressure, if you like, or in the way the system is currently structured in relation to, for example, funding. You see a pressure towards what is more a kind of elitist view of the way the funding is organized and teaching and PhD excellence and the programs for excellence are actually organized. So that is the positive and the negative at the level of research, particularly PhD research, which in my country is, particularly in British academia right now, is one of the aspects that we're going to use in order to assess excellent research. Okay, so all the different universities are currently being evaluated on their research excellence. The process itself is called the Research Excellence Framework, and virtually all the universities are participating in this process. And the number of PhD, the way the research is being produced within the university is one of the criteria, or better, one of the areas where each one of the universities are evaluated. So obviously that's an important part. All the PhD work and the PhD programs are significant for that because it's part of what we call the research environment. However, another aspect of that has been the research output and therefore an evaluation of all the different output produced by each single individual in the organization, the university, who's research active, as we say. So it's someone who has to produce by contract a certain number of outputs. Okay, so fundamentally the idea is that people produce 4 papers in the research framework, and the 4 papers or 4 outputs, it could be anything, and the research excellence framework is very clear that it could be anything. So it could be an article in a journal, it could be chapter in a book, it could be a book, and so on. So it's not very specifically defined. Anything can be a research output. However, the way in which this has been understood is mostly associated to journal articles, okay? And journal articles only in specific journals, okay? So there has been the constitution of specific ranking lists of different journals, and there are different type of lists. Some of them, for example, one of them is the Financial Times one, another one is the what we call the ABS list, which is the Association of Business School list, and this has become one of the most influential lists, and it basically lists all the journals you can imagine, and it evaluates them from 4, 3, 2, and 1. And in this process, what has happened is that the majority of the ranking has been associated to where these journals are published. So the top ranked journals have ended up being all American journals, while some of the Europeans, particularly in our field, are still highly ranked. But what has happened is that some journals which are actually very good are ranked as the 2, for example, which is not that good, and even some which are very good are also ranked as 1. So fundamentally, there has been a little bit of a shaking up of what was supposed to, if you like, help the process of evaluation. It has had unintended consequences because of the way it has been understood, particularly by top management in some of the key universities in the United Kingdom. Okay, so that the research excellence framework in relation to the outputs fundamentally is a peer review process where the panel is going to read the outputs and evaluate them for their excellence. So the contribution to knowledge, the originality, and so on and so forth. Okay? But what has happened at the level of management, particularly top management, in preparation of the ref, has been, if you like, almost a misappropriation or misunderstanding of how to evaluate the outputs. And what has become important is not the actual quality of the output, but where the output has been published. Okay, so only the output which are published in these top-ranking journals are accepted or are going to be included in the submission for the ref. So obviously, as you can imagine, this can have very, very strange result, can produce very, very strange results, because not necessarily something that is produced, or there is not an immediate correlation between the ranking that has been done by the ABS list, particularly when it comes to the lower levels, and the actual excellence of an output. Yeah, so we are living this, we are experiencing these problems because obviously what has happened is that the results of this has been associated particularly to an individualization, obviously, of the output themselves. So what is important is how many stars your publication have, and not the quality of your scholarship and the quality of your engagement, and so on and so forth. And this has also had consequences at the level of, for example, selection and hiring of faculty and academics. So there has been another negative, if you like, or potentially problematic issue. And as well as the fact that elements associated to collegiality, as well as what in organizational study we would call traditionally the fit between the group and the group of academics and their concerns, also at the level of, for example, teaching, as well as research values, and so on and so forth, hasn't had any, or very few consideration often during the hiring process or the promotion processes, and so on and so forth. Yeah? And so obviously that can create serious issues when it comes to actually teaching students and so on. I'm not saying that this is necessarily this is going to have necessarily negative consequences, but certainly we can see that there are a number of issues already which could be potentially deleterious for a lot of different schools and a lot of different universities, exactly because of this very narrow-minded way in which the outputs have been evaluated. Okay, so this is I think some of the issues. You also have to appreciate how much they are within a specific environment where there is certainly a restructuring of the higher education sector, where there is less funding dedicated to teaching and support of teaching. Currently the universities have been given and granted the permission to increase their fees, so students can pay up to £9,000, which is a very different system that we, or to a certain extent, has moved the burden of education towards the family and then ultimately towards the taxpayer, because obviously if the student cannot pay once they enter into a labour market, they obviously start with a very, very high level of debt, and they themselves have to pay, and then obviously eventually if they cannot pay, it goes back to the taxpayers. Yeah, so it's a system that is again putting pressures on the family. It can also have negative consequences because clearly when you come from a middle class, they are always able to and understand a certain the higher education as an investment, if you like. So they are always already prepared to make that investment. When it comes to working class people and working class potential students, they may find the notion of having such high level of debt very scary and very problematic, and therefore they may decide not to enter higher education exactly because of this high level of debt. Yeah. Clearly, what we are observing is a marketization, if you like, of higher education, where higher education, both at the level of student relation, and is becoming a market where students engage in higher education as a product, a commodity they are buying, which obviously can create huge issues in relation to student expectation, student investment, student experience, and so on. But obviously, one of the other problems is how much higher education itself and academic work itself has been transformed into a market relation and a commodity itself. So producing an output and understanding research production as the production of output is one of, if you like, the examples of this commodification of higher education. So clearly there are a lot of attempts, if you like, within academic work and within scholarly work to think about all these issues in a critical way, in a way that can help us to understand that there are problems with it and that we have to think seriously in a reflective way on if it's the best possible set of solutions for us, if we are going in the right direction, or if maybe we need to do things differently. All this kind of work in the United Kingdom is certainly been done right now. Often this kind of work is associated not only obviously in relation to higher education, because to a certain extent higher education is one of the latest sectors to be invested with this managerialization and marketization of the relations, right? Because it has already happened quite significantly, for example, in the health sector. Yeah, and also in the public sector, in public administration, I mean. So clearly, higher education is one of the latest sectors that have been incorporated, if you like, in this managerialism and marketization of the organizational and work relations. Critical management has been a movement within academia that has tried exactly to look at management in a critical way, management as a system and as a set of structures, a set of procedures, a set of logics that clearly can have not only positive but also negative consequences, and consequences that rather than producing progress, equality and emancipation can actually have a production of inequality and an oppressive relationship. So that kind of work has been going on for quite a few years. It is not only, I must say, a phenomenon in the United Kingdom, but it's a broader phenomenon which has involved various realities in the United States. Obviously in Latin America there are some examples of this, and as well as Australia, quite a few examples in Scandinavian countries, and various European countries too. So it is, to a certain extent, a global phenomenon, which has been associated particularly to academia, and therefore specifically the way we engage with the production of our knowledge, so the output, if you like, but we call it scholarship rather than output. And on the other hand, also the way we engage with our students, and therefore the relationship that we establish with our students in the educational processes with them. So it is about, I suppose, facilitating critical pedagogical ways in which we engage with students, and the kind of relationship we try to establish at the level of classrooms and at the level of learning, really. And there are many different ways in which we try to do that, and there are many different experiences. A lot of it has been written, so there is quite a significant literature already out there around what we call critical management education. So how to teach students in business school and in management school an approach and an understanding of the mainstreams, if you like, which also engage with the question of consequences, both consequences at the level of knowledge, at the level of politics, and at the level of ethics. Yeah. So all those three aspects are considered, not only an understanding of management as a kind of instrumental set of processes. One just learns the techniques and then goes out in the world and reproduces them without any problem with that. But it's, yes, teaching the mainstream, but at the same time trying to facilitate an understanding and the possibility of reflecting in a critical way on the consequences that this technique may have at the political and an ethical level. Yeah, for the students themselves, obviously, as workers, as managers, as those who actually gonna actively be involved in the reproduction of social relations once they are outside the university working, but also obviously always already within the university as students, as consumers, and so on. To a certain extent, there has been what is happening right now could be considered backlash, if you like, a counter, sort of counter movement towards what critical management and has tried to do in the past, you said, in the past 20 years or so, which was associated to very much to also a diversification and pluralization of the understanding of management, organizations, and so on, which has been a very positive thing and has given rise to, for example, a number of journals and a number of activities and conferences and institutions, like, for example, the Academy of Management in the United States. There is a critical management division, which obviously has been, to a certain extent, a positive development. But there are also a lot of other positive examples. However, I think that one of the things that we haven't been able to do very much in the past has been the engagement at the broader political level, and that's maybe why the backlash has been so strong. I think one of the positive developments of maybe the past 2 or 3 years has been the fact that a lot of critical management people are branching out, if you like, and reaching out to different kind of initiatives that are beyond the kind of restrictive view of educational relationship and critical management pedagogy and so on and so forth, which, don't get me wrong, is very important, and I think it is important that we continue to develop that and support all the different people around the world trying to educate students in a different way and engaging in educational relations which are different from the traditional top-down kind of approaches which simply reproduce the traditional hierarchical relations and so on. However, I think it's also important that we try to really branch out and try to engage in reaching out activities, relating ourselves and our views and our beliefs and our values to the broader political domain and the broader political issues that are currently part of our societal discussions and the issues that are discussed in all the different, in Europe or in the United Kingdom, in the US and so on, and here, I suppose, in Latin America. So the positive, if you like, out of a rather negative story is that I think that is happening much more. Maybe also because we are engaging, we are understanding to a certain extent, critical management is also growing up, and therefore we're becoming more aware of our role and our possibilities as political interlocutor, as well as sort of academics interested in critical ideas. think, and I've tried to convey during my visit and my discussion and the discussion we had, how important it is that your experience is made available, if you like, through publications and writing and engagement with international conferences and so on, so that we can all learn, also in Europe and in the United Kingdom, what happened when a neoliberal system becomes the way to structure higher education sector and the relationship in higher education. I think currently you have a very strong movement, and the movement has been going on for a while. There is an interesting set of relationships which currently are being, to a certain extent, dislocated, so a new number of possibilities available. And I think for us it's very, very important to learn about your experience, your history, and what kind of results that can generate in a specific environment. I'm not saying that the UK necessarily will become like Chile now, but certainly it is interesting for us to learn what happens within certain conditions in those specific situations, and I think we can learn a lot from it.